السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
السلام
إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهدي الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد، فنتابع القراءة في كتاب الأدب المفرد للإمام محمد بن إسماعيل البخاري رحمه الله. باب من أغلق الباب على الجار. حدثنا مالك بن إسماعيل حدثنا عبد السلام عن ليث عن نافع عن ابن عمر قال: لقد أتى علينا زمان أو قال حين وما أحد أحق بديناره ودرهمه من أخيه المسلم، ثم إن الآن الدينار والدرهم أحب إلى أحدنا من أخيه المسلم. سمعت رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول: كم من جار متعلق بجاره يوم القيامة يقول: يا رب هذا أغلق بابه دوني فمنع معروفه. Today we're reading about the chapter, continuing last time talking about the importance of being respectful and beautiful to your neighbors. And this chapter about how one should not turn away his neighbor, preventing him from any help that he can offer. In this narration, Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma, he said there was time that for us we always respected our Muslim brothers more than any gold or silver, dinar and dirham. Dinar was gold and dirham was silver. And now there are times where for us dinar and dirham, gold and silver, is more important than our Muslim brother. I've heard Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say, on a day of judgment, there will be neighbors coming, holding to their neighbor and say, "Oh Allah, this person locked his door against me and he would not help me or give me the extra of what he had." So this is the part of the hadith that's related here, that one should not lock his door against his neighbor when he can help him. So this is the meaning of it. If you can help your neighbor, you should help him. Don't be alone, and when you have extra and people in need, you can help your neighbor. Decide not to. Now, which time Ibn Umar was talking about? He's talking about time of Tabi'een. So he lived times of the Sahaba, saying Tabi'een. Just talking one generation. What he will say if you see our times nowadays? So things started expanding. The Muslim community in Medina was small. Everybody knew one another, and your neighbors, all of them, you know them. Probably everybody in Medina, you know them by then. By the end of times of Abu Bakr, Umar, and Uthman, when Medina started expanding, became the center of this expanding, ruling country. A lot of wealth came to it, a lot of people came to it, so there would become a lot of strangers in Medina and so on. And people started forgetting about these teachings. Wealth started to flow. People start building bigger houses, they have more servants, they have more things. And there were people who were needy and so on. There were people who were generous. We know from the Sahaba, from the Tabi'een, about a lot of people, how generous they are and so on. But it wasn't the same thing at times of of Rasulullah sallallahu and the early generation of Sahaba. So when he has extra, start with your family, immediate family. When you expand it to your neighbor. If you have a neighbor that is a family, is related to you, has more obligation, and then if you have extra, then you look after your neighborhood. It's better for you. When the whole neighborhood is doing better, they support one another. When you're out in traveling and so on, your neighbor will care for you. They say, "Oh, this is a good neighbor. I'll look after him. Somebody trying to hurt his family and so on, I'll protect him." But if you're always keeping to yourself, you don't care about anybody else, nobody will care about you. باب لا يشبع دون جاره. حدثنا محمد بن كثير قال أخبرنا سفيان عن عبد الملك بن أبي بشير عن عبد الله بن المساور قال سمعت ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما يخبر ابن الزبير رضي الله عنهما يقول سمعت النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول ليس المؤمن الذي يشبع وجاره جائع. In this chapter about one should not has his stomach filled and his neighbor is hungry. Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma, he was telling Ibn Zubayr, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, that he heard Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam saying, a believer is a true believer, is not somebody who has his stomach full and his neighbor is going hungry. So here, laysa al-mu'min doesn't mean he's not a believer, he's not a complete or perfect believer if he doesn't care about his neighbors. باب يكثر ماء المرق فيقسم في الجيران. حدثنا بشر بن محمد قال أخبرنا عبد الله قال أخبرنا شعبة عن أبي عمران الجوني عن عبد الله بن الصامت عن أبي ذر قال أوصاني خليلي بثلاثة اسمع وأطع ولو لعبد مجدع الأطراف وإذا صنعت مرقة فأكثر ماءها ثم انظر أهل بيت من جيرانك فأصبهم منه بمعروف وصل الصلاة لوقتها فإن وجدت الإمام قد صلى فقد أحرزت صلاتك وإلا فهي نافلة. قال النووي معناها إذا علمت من حالهم تأخيرها عن وقتها المختار فصلها لأول وقتها ثم إن صلوها لوقتها المختار فصلها معهم وتكون صلاتك معهم نافلة وإلا كنت قد أحرزت صلاتك بفعلك في أول الوقت أي حصلتها وصنتها واحتط لها. So this is a chapter about when somebody cook meal, let them have more of the gravy that comes with it and add more water to it so he can gift it to his neighbors. If you can think about what was their food at that time, mostly bread and maybe some dates. That's mostly what they had. So, and bread, the poor people have it from barley, which is very harsh, very hard to eat, and the lucky ones will have it from wheat flour. And that's mostly what they ate. They get some water with it and eat it. So if somebody cooks and give them some of that gravy that comes from cooking the meat, it adds flavor to it, even if there's not a lot of meat in it. Just have something to dip the bread in it, that give it flavor to it. So he told them when you cook, make it abundant. So even if you have like just one piece of meat, you got a shoulder or leg or something, it's barely enough for your family, make at least the liquid part more abundant, give it to your neighbors, and choose one of them. If it's not enough for everybody, at least you give it one for them. So the hadith here narrated by Abu Dharr radiyallahu anh, that my best friend, that is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Khalili, he told me, advised me three things. Listen and obey, that is for your ruler. Even if your ruler was a slave, that his arms are cut off. So he's not worthy of ruling, he doesn't come from a good family, physically he's not fit to be a ruler, but he's assigned a ruler on you. Just because you don't like him, you don't think he's fit for ruling, you do not rebel. So listen and obey. And when you're cooking meat, then have extra liquid in it, give it to your neighbors. And when you pray, pray on time. If you find the imam already prayed, then your prayer is perfect, is correct, and your jama'ah prayer is sunnah. What he means by that sometimes you'll have people making the salah not on time. So they might be calling for Salatul Fajr later on than its time or very early than its time. You still pray jama'ah with them, but you pray your salah on time. So let's say Fajr time is 5 o'clock. And you have people that praying it at 6 o'clock. Yes, technically it's before sunrise, but that's not their preferred time. So what do? You pray it when it comes at home, and then you come pray in jama'ah to get the ajr of jama'ah. So in the jama'ah, it will be sunnah for you, but you get the ajr, and you pray it at the right time. And so on, for whatever prayer it is. So if you live in a location, you live in a country, whatever it is, and they're deciding not to pray things on time, you pray on time, and if you have to repeat with the jama'ah, then that will be sunnah for you. حدثنا الحميدي حدثنا أبو عبد الصمد العمي حدثنا أبو عمران عن عبد الله بن الصامت عن أبي ذر قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يا أبا ذر إذا طبخت مرقة فأكثر ماء المرقة فتعاهد جيرانك أو اقسم في جيرانك. Second hadith to the same meaning where Abu Dhar was advised when he cooks that he will add extra liquid to his cooking and he will gift to his parents, to his neighbors. باب خير الجيران حدثنا عبد الله بن يزيد حدثنا حيوة قال أخبرنا شرحبيل بن شريك أنه سمع أبا عبد الرحمن الحبلي يحدث عن عبد الله بن عمرو بن العاص رضي الله عنهما عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال خير الأصحاب عند الله تعالى خيرهم لصاحبه وخير الجيران عند الله تعالى خيرهم لجاره. In this hadith, Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As, he said, he narrates from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he said, the best of friends are the one that is good to his friends, and the best of neighbors are, in the eyes of Allah, the one that is good to his neighbors. Being good, different levels, religion-wise and dunya-wise. So, religion-wise, when you advise your friend or neighbor to do the right thing, encourage them for the salah, for the fasting, and so on. And at the same time, dunya-wise, when they need help, whether it's financial advice, emotional support, whatever they need, you're there for them. Allah love you for that act. باب الجار الصالح حدثنا محمد بن كثير أخبرنا سفيان عن حبيب بن أبي ثابت قال حدثني خميل عن نافع بن عبد الحارث عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من سعادة المرء المسلم المسكن الواسع والجار الصالح والمركب الهنيء. In this narration, Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم said, part of the happiness for a believing person to have a house that's big enough for him, a good neighbor, and a means of transportation that's easy and enjoyable. And we all can testify to that. If you live in a bad neighborhood, that's not good. If your house doesn't fulfill your needs, it's not a good house by itself, that's a source of misery. And if your means of transportation isn't good or you don't have means of transportation, it's not good. But if you have reliable means of transportation, you live in a house that fulfills your needs, and you have good neighbors around you, that's a reason for your happiness. In other narrations, you'll see mentioning also the wife, having a good wife. So it depends. If they're married, having a good wife, not married, these also. باب الجار السوء حدثنا صدقة قال أخبرنا سليمان هو ابن حيان عن ابن عجلان عن سعيد عن أبي هريرة قال كان من دعاء النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم اللهم إني أعوذ بك من جار السوء في دار المقام فإن جار الدنيا يتحول. This narration, Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu says that part of the dua of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that he asked refuge in Allah from a bad neighbor in a place of settling, Darul Muqam. And here a lot of ulama say this is the grave. That Rasulullah did not want neighbors in his graves that are bad people, because he will hear them when they're punished. And that will be a source of misery for him. فإن جار الدنيا يتحول. The neighbor that you have in this life, if he's not good, he moves or you move. But you're in the grave, you're stuck until the day of judgment. And that's why it's very important for Muslims to be buried in Muslim graveyard, not to be buried in a graveyard with non-Muslims around them. I know a lot of field graveyards, what they do, they take a section of the graveyard away from others for the Muslims. That's probably, you try as much as possible, remove the graves of Muslims away from non-Muslims so they would not be hurt by hearing their punishment. And if you have a place of burial that's only for Muslims, that would be even better. And we know that the Sahaba would choose where they want to be buried if they're living in the same place. When Rasulullah ﷺ died, Abu Bakr asked that he'll be buried where the grave of Rasulullah ﷺ. Remember, prophets are buried wherever they die. He died in the room of Aisha radiallahu anha, next to the Masjid al-Nabawi. So he was buried there. So when her father was dying, he asked permission from her to be buried there. So he was buried with his friend there. And then there was, the room small, there was only left for one more grave. So she was planning, when she dies, she wanted to be buried there. But when Umar radiallahu anhu was stabbed, took him about 3 days to die, he asked to be buried next to his two friends. So he sent somebody to ask Aisha to give him permission to be buried there. And she thought about it. She said, I was keeping it for me, but I will give permission for Umar to be buried there. And after he died, he sent his son again, and he asked her permission again, because first time I asked, I was still Khalifa. Ask her if I'm dead, I'm not Khalifa anymore, somebody else. If she still wants to give me the grave, and she said yes. And so that's why you find Rasulullah ﷺ next to him, Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhuma. So they chose the companion of the good people. Should one be moved to another location for burial? It shouldn't. One should be buried in the same locality wherever he's buried, unless there is a good reason. So somebody died in a city, there is no Muslim burial there, he's going to be buried among non-Muslim, then he should be moved to the nearest Muslim graveyard. But should not be moved to another places. I know a lot of people in Saudi Arabia were trying their best to be buried in Mecca or Medina. And they will do whatever they can, take their deceased loved one in a car, drive for hours, and go in Mecca or Medina, so they pray on them and be buried in them. This is not the way of the Sahaba. A person, wherever he dies, he's buried there. Rasulullah ﷺ in times of Uhud, when 70 of the best Sahaba was killed, some of them went, brought their dead one and brought him to Medina to be buried. Uhud is far from Medina, outskirts of Medina, several miles. And he told him, no, get them back where they died, bury them there. So moving the place of burial for no reason is not recommended. حدثنا مخلد بن مالك حدثنا عبد الرحمن بن مغراء حدثنا بريد بن عبد الله عن أبي بردة عن أبي موسى قال قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لا تقوم الساعة حتى يقتل الرجل جاره وأخاه وأباه. This is a severe warning, this hadith. Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم said the last hour, the day of judgment, will not happen until there will be time where a person will be killing his neighbor, his brother, and his father. So there will be the worst of people left. They'll be so selfish, they don't care who they will kill. Most likely there will be no Muslims left by that time. Because we know from Hadith al-Fitan that at the end of times, after all the tribulations that will happen, Isa alayhi salam, he will descend back on earth. All believers will follow him. They will fight the Masih al-Dajjal, and Muslims will prevail. And then Ya'juj and Ma'juj will break the barrier. That's what's keeping them from rest of the people, and they occupy the earth. And Muslims are told to go to the tops of mountains because they cannot stand for these people. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a disease that killed them all, and then wash off your bodies, and there will be 40 years of peace. The Muslims will enjoy life, abundance will be there, peace will be there. And in these 40 years, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take the souls of all the believers. So only the worst of people will stay on this earth. And Shaitan will be king. By then, people will worship him. They put a throne for him, and the devil worship will be the main religion by then. And people starting becoming very bad people, where they do all kinds of crimes, including this, until the day of judgment will happen on them. All the horrible things happen, all the earthquakes, and all the disasters happen on them. So that's part of it, where there will be no trust. If you don't trust your neighbor, your brother, your father, who are you going to trust? There's nobody to trust. That means life is not worth living by then. So inshallah, we'll stop that section. I'm going to be reminding the brothers about, yes?
I have a question about the graves. For example, in Morocco, after like 70, 80 years, they'll redig the graves and reuse the same land to bury new deceased people. What is the ruling on this?
It is permissible if there's no more remains left in the grave. If the graves still have remains, should not be disturbed. If there's still bones and remains, the grave of Muslims is sacred. But if the grave is, depending on the area, if it is known after 50, 60 years, there's nothing left there, it could be reused. It is well known that Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, when he died, he asked the farmer, he told him, when I die, I want you to bury me in your land. He bought a piece of him and say, make 3 different graves so people don't know where my grave is. Because people revered him. He kind of revived a lot of the sunnah of the Sahaba after people forgot about it. So he was afraid that people start visiting his grave and will be a reason people reveal him so much we're going to start worshiping him. So he said, bury me 3 different places people wouldn't know which one I'm buried. And then after so many years, cultivate the land and farm it like the rest of your farm. So there'll be nothing left of it. So it is. But in general, Muslim grave lands should be kept intact. Should not be moved. Muslims should not be dug and moved outside to a different place without a very strong, valid reason. كسر عظم المسلم ميتا ككسره حيا. If you break a bone of a Muslim after he's dead, the same way you broke it when he's alive. It's haram. This is haram. So it should not be done if there is any remains that is still valid. If the remains are gone, that's fine.
Sheikh, what about I don't know if this happens in Syria, but in Egypt, basically the way medical students learn anatomy is the guy who takes care of the graveyard gets the bones from an unknown source. They
raid the graveyard and find bones. No, it should not be taken from Muslims. Muslim graveyard, this is haram. And nowadays, alhamdulillah, there's a lot of plastic bones that people can buy without having the... I remember we used to go and buy skulls and stuff like this. We don't ask where the source is. Probably somebody working in a graveyard that dug them, but this is not correct. It shouldn't be done. So, just reminding the brothers that the 10 days of the Hijjah started yesterday. Part of it is preparing for Udhiyah, to make the sacrifice on the day of Eid. And the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam narrated in Sahih Muslim that whoever intends to make udhiyah, once the 10 days of the Hijjah start, he shouldn't be cutting his nails or his hair. إذا نوى أحدكم الأضحية فلا يأخذ من شعره وأظافره شيئا إذا دخل عشر الحجة. فقط للمضحي، يعني أحيانا هذا الزوج يضحي عن نفسه وأهل بيته، فهو فقط الذي يلتزم بهذا، زوجه وأولاده ومن يعين ما هم مسؤولين عنه، فقط هذا الشخص. So the person who's going to be in charge of doing the sacrifice for the whole family is the one who commits to that, will not cut his nails and his hair. The rest of the family, they don't have to. So whether it's his wife, his children, and so on, whoever, he's the only one that's responsible. And one sacrifice, one animal, is enough for the whole family. Now, yesterday, I think, yes, the Sheikh in the other masjid was talking about that there is a narration that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he wanted to sacrifice and he was cutting his nails and his hair. Two different situations. That happened when he's going for Hajj. So Dhul Hijjah started and he's not in a state of ihram yet. He cut his nails, he cut his hair, and then later on went in a state of ihram and done it. So that's one for in Hajj. In Hajj, you don't stop cutting hair and nail until you are in a state of ihram. For a performing Hajj, like most of us here, what applies is starting the first 10th of the Hijjah, the first day of the Hijjah. Once it starts, that's the time you stop it. So two different hadith talking about two different situations. Some people combine it together. I said, oh, if he's making Hajj and time for Udhiyah is there, and Dhul Hijjah already starting, he's cutting his nails, well, that's two totally different situation. So you cannot apply this to this. Plus, القول مقدم على الفعل. So whenever there's an order to do something, Rasulullah does something different, the order is more general. The action is more specific. Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he's given certain permissions not given to the rest of the ummah. So we don't know if this is part of it. So what we take is the general order. Some ulama combine them together and say, well, if he orders something and he does the opposite, it means the order is encouragement, it's not wajib. That it brings it from being a wajib to mustahab. So some people took that stance. But the general rule, when you have two ahadith that apparently they contradict one another, you do not pick and choose. It's not that means, oh, I have this hadith saying this hadith saying, I can choose, I can do this one or this one. No. The principle, all the ahadith should be worked upon, and you find a way to reconcile it. Reconciling it in this specific one, we say these are two different situations. One in Hajj, you don't stop cutting your nails and hair until you're actually in state of ihram, whether it's the first day of the Hijjah or not. Because some people will be in state of ihram only when they're gonna go Yawm al-Tarwiyah, the 8th day of the Hijjah. So they might be first in ihram for Umrah al-Qudum. So they will make the ihram, go enter Mecca, they make Tawaf al-Qudum, al-Umrah, and then they will be in Tamattu'. And then they will wear the clothes again and so on. So during this period of time, which could be days, sometimes longer, depending how long they stay, they can cut their hairs, fingernails, and so on, until the day they go back in state of ihram on the 8th day of the Hijjah. Then they stop doing it again. But for people who are not in Mecca, they're not performing Hajj, then that applies is the first day of the Hijjah. Now, is it haram to cut it? It relates to the order of making al-udhiyah. Is udhiyah wajib or not? And the ulama have some different opinions about it, because the order of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was that whoever has means to sacrifice and he decides not to sacrifice, will not do the udhiyah, you should not come and pray Salatul Eid with us. I mean, it is wajib to make the udhiyah. So if the udhiyah is wajib, then that means whatever connects to it is wajib. So you don't cut your fingernails or hair. But there are other ulama in the opinion where udhiyah is mustahab. Sunnah mu'akkada, mustahabba, but it's not wajib. And they have the proof of it where Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu himself, he never made the udhiyah. He said, I want the ummah to understand it's not a wajib. So those who can afford it should do it. Those who don't afford it should not feel that they are missing something that's an obligation. And that's where the different opinions come from. Is this udhiyah wajib or is it sunnah mu'akkada mustahabba, something that highly encouraged? So if it is sunnah mustahabba mu'akkada, well, that means they have the choice to do it, not to do it. So if they happen to cut their hairs and fingernails, that means to start with, it's not an obligation. They haven't sinned. And those who are in the opinion that it is wajib, then one should not. I would say to be on the safe side, as long as a person is responsible for doing the sacrifice for his family, he's the one paying for it or actually doing it, he shouldn't cut his fingernails and hair, unless there is a reason. So somebody, he broke part of his finger, started hurting him, or something of that sort. Some people have their hair, they go too long, they start digging in their skin and causing infections and stuff like this. Yeah, that's the reason. The problem is a lot of people shave their beard. So if they want to do the udhiyah, they say, okay, I'm going to stay 10 days not shaving. Well, yes. You're supposed to stay all your life not shaving. So start with these 10 days and keep going. You see there are a lot of people doing Hajj also. When they stay in Ihram, they don't shave. And so they keep it, and after Yawm al-Eid, they shave. No, continue with it. It is Sunan al-Fitra. Sunan al-Fitra is intuition sunnah. It is the highest form of obligation. That a man grow his beard and trim his mustache. So Sunan al-Fitra for a male to be circumcised, grow the beard, trim the mustache, remove the hair under the armpit and in the groin. So these are common sense sunnah. They're highly obligated on a Muslim man to do. So start with, to those who haven't grown their beard, start now and keep it. Now.
The sacrifice which the people who go on Hajj do, is it different from the sacrifice who don't go on Hajj do? Like if they are doing tamattu, like
yes.
they do the sacrifice.
Yeah.
So is it different than the people who don't do the sacrifice, or like the people who go on Hajj, do they have to do sacrifice?
So in Hajj, if they're doing Hajj al-Ifrad, they don't have to do sacrifice. If they're only doing Hajj, that's it. If they're doing Qiran or Tamattu', then they have to do the sacrifice. So if they're doing Umrah with the Hajj together or disconnected, then they have to do the sacrifice. If they're just doing Hajj alone, they don't have to. And for that sacrifice is per individual. So if somebody went with 5 members of their family, they have 5 sacrifices to do. Udhiyah here is one for the whole family. So it's different.
So if they're planning to do tamattu and sacrifice, do they trim or?
No, only for the state of Ihram, not for the Udhiyah.
Okay.
So I said, if they've done Umrah, let's say end of the Qa'dah, and they stayed in state of Tamattu' until the 8th day. The 8th day of Dhul Hijjah, they wear Ihram again and they go towards Mina. So that's when they stop cutting the hair. Anytime, even if it's the first week of Dhul Hijjah, they can still cut their hair and fingernails. So let's say it's 2 different situations. Right now, if you want to do the Udhiyah, you can still wear perfume, wear regular clothes, and so on. During state of Ihram, they're not supposed to wear perfume. The clothes should not be tightly tailored to them. Should be the loose izar and rida for the men. So it's 2 different things. What we're doing right now is more like a reminder about the Hajj. So the majority of Muslims are not going to be able to join Hajj every year. So they still live in that environment of Hajj. So you for 10 days you don't cut your fingernails and hairs, so reminding you about the state of ihram. And then you make a sacrifice, reminding about some of the rituals they do there. It's not the same. A person that's not doing Hajj, they fast Yawm Arafah. And when you fast the day of Arafah, it's expiation, forgiveness for year past and year to come. People who are doing Hajj, they're not permitted to fast Arafah. So, as I said, it's two different rules apply to them. It's just what we do outside Hajj is a reminder of what people do in Hajj, but two different things.
There's the ruling of if you plan to slaughter and you shouldn't cut hair or nails, this only applies for a person who's doing it physically himself, or if we all send money to have someone else do it, is that the same?
So as long as you are the responsible person, you're doing it or you're assigning another person, but you are the one who's paying for it.
Yeah.
If you are paying for it, then that's what you do.
So you shouldn't cut your hair.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So,
you're
yeah.
the one paying for it.
Yes, yeah, since you are paying for it. Yeah. But the rest members of the family don't have to do it.
For example, this year, the first day of the Hijjah fell on a Friday. So does that ruling of not cutting your nails supersede the sunnah of cutting your nails on Friday?
Yes. Yeah. So now what happens? People forgot. They didn't know. Start from this point on. It's if people don't know, they're not responsible for their ignorance. But once they know, they should adhere to it. But I said, if it reaches a point where it is harmful, then harm can be removed. The same thing for people in state of ihram. If somebody has a disease that requires him to cut his hair during Hajj, he can cut it, but he has to make fidya. So he will slaughter a sheep for this action. So anytime there is harm for a person, harm can be removed. It will be a reason to break the rules. It's part of the rules, they can break it when there is harm. Now,
So I heard about if somebody died in a locality,
yeah.
you cannot move them
Mhm.
to another place. How about the situation of an immigrant that he's the only one here, and his offsprings are back
Yes.
from where he came from? Is there any kind of leeway that you can bury him there to allow them to be?
Unless there is no Muslim barrier in his place.
Okay.
So let's say somebody died in a city, there's no Muslim, and his embassy will pay for him to be brought back to his country, and I know a lot of times they do that. Then in this case, there is a reason, you do that. But if there's no reason, there's a barrier place that's proper. It's not like a small 10 graves in 1,000 non-Muslim graveyard.
Okay.
Yeah, but if there's a proper graveyard, it shouldn't be moved.
So even though his family will not benefit from the
Yeah, the dua will reach him. When you're making dua for people who buried in a graveyard, you don't have to be specific. So you don't have to stand on the graveyard of your parents and make dua. You can make that dua anywhere you go.
Yeah.
And when you go to and visit the graveyard of Muslims, it doesn't have to be relatives that died there. You visit the Muslims in general, you make dua for them, and it reminds you about the hereafter. So it doesn't have to be exactly. And we know from a lot of the Sahaba died outside Medina. None of them brought them back to Medina to be buried with the rest of the Sahaba. So we know from their actions that, and the orders for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that everybody should be buried wherever they die.
في المقبرة في يقرأ القرآن أو
No.
بعد المقبرة بعد ما يدفنوا نصهم يقرأ القرآن نصهم يعمل الدعاء واحد يعمل الدعاء والثاني يعمل
الأصل فيه هو الدعاء. الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم بعد أن يدفن الميت يأمر الصحابة أن يجلسوا ويسألوا لأخيهم الثبات ويسألوا له المغفرة. قراءة القرآن ليست من السنة الدفن، لكن من شاء أن يذكر الله هذا ذكر لله. القرآن يقرأ القرآن الإنسان في أي مكان وفي أي زمان، لا يختص بهذا المكان. بعض الناس اختصوا بسورة ياسين يقرأوها على الأموات أو يقرأوا الفاتحة على الأموات، لم يرد فيها سنة. أما إذا الإنسان هذا الذي يحسن يحفظ سورة الفاتحة يحفظ ياسين ويريد أن يكون من ذكر هذا القرآن يفعله ليس لخصوصه، هذا من عموم ذكر الله الله أعلم. Asking that some people go to the graveyard and they start reading Quran for the dead person. It has not been mentioned part of the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He usually, when he buried a Muslim, he will tell Muslim brothers to sit down and now make dua for the dead person. So after they've done Salatul Mayyit and so on, after they bury him, make dua for him for thabat. That Allah give him steadfast, he will answer the crucial 3 questions. Who's your Lord? What is your religion? Who's your prophet? This is the last final test. Pass or fail. Jannah or hellfire. So this is the final one, the biggest one. And it is the sum of all the actions that he's done in his life, his beliefs and his action. So they ask thabat for him, because some people are kind of wishy-washy. They're Muslims, they practice sometimes, they don't practice sometimes. So during that stage, you don't know, are they going to get the right answers or not? So you push them, you help your Muslim brother by asking thabat for him in that state. Reading Quran is dhikr of Allah. It can be read anywhere, any place, but it shouldn't be specifically. If somebody, that's only what they know, they memorize Surah Al-Fatiha or Surah Yasin, they want to read it because that's only what they know, it's part of dhikrillah. But to think it is part of Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you go to the graveyard and you raise your hand, you read Fatiha, wipe your face and so on. These are rituals that people done later on, has nothing to do with the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
I want to ask a question about the Adhiyah. I have a family in Mauritania, in Africa, and if I can do a Adhiyah, me, myself, is it sufficient or enough for me to do it here and then they can not do it?
Are you financially responsible for the family there?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if your family there, you are the main financial supporter for them, wherever you sacrifice, here or there is enough for the whole family. But if you are part of a family, you still have your father, all the brothers, they only spend and so on, then they have their own responsibility. Udhiyah, to do it in hand, in person, that's the best thing. But if you cannot do it, then you assign somebody else to do it. If in your locality there's a lot of hungry and needy people, better do it in your locality. If there are more Muslims somewhere else who would benefit from it, they might not have eaten meat the whole year, and you send it to them, that you get also reward for that. So you use your judgment. If you're not sure, do it both ways. Do it in your locality, send it there. If Allah has give you abundance of wealth, then do more of that. نتابع القراءة في فقه الصلاة. باب ما يجب على المرأة ستره في الصلاة. يجب على المرأة أن تستر بدنها كله في الصلاة خلى الوجه والكفين. قوله تعالى: ولا يبدين زينتهن إلا ما ظهر منها. قال ابن كثير رحمه الله: ألا يظهرن شيئا من الزينة للأجانب إلا ما لا يمكن إخفاؤه. قال ابن المنذر: ذلك الكفان والوجه، فممن روينا ذلك عنه ابن عباس وعطاء ومكحول وسعيد بن جبير. So what should a woman be covering up when she's praying? When she's praying, she covers her body except the face and the hand. So even if it is not the full jilbab, the dark cloth that usually when she goes out, but during the salah, she needs to cover her head, her neck, her arms, her legs should be all covered. Her feet need to be covered. So some women don't pay attention to that their feet are not covered. What they're wearing is short or showing their feet. What is allowed is for the face and for the hand. In the ayah in Surah An-Nisa, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ Surah An-Nur, وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا. They don't show their makeup or beautification except with things that appear without intention. So the ulama say that's usually if she had some eyeliner, if she wearing some kind of jewelry in her hand, it showed, or it had some henna in her hand, it showed, then this is something she doesn't intend to show, but she lives, she goes, buys and sells and going to the market, it will show. But she shouldn't intentionally attract attention by having extra makeup. At that time, Muslim women are not known to wear lipsticks, powder their noses, their cheeks, and all kind of, they just have eyeliner. That was the most of the beauty do. And they had henna and jewelry. وقد اختلفت أقوال السلف في تفسير لا يبدين زينتهن إلا ما ظهر منها، فمن قائل أنها الثياب الظاهرة، ومن قائل أنها الكحل والخاتم والسوار والوجه، وغيرها من الأقوال التي رواها ابن جرير في تفسيره عن بعض الصحابة والتابعين، والمختار أن المراد بهذا الاستثناء الوجه والكفان، ويدخل في ذلك الكحل والخاتم والسوار والخضاب. So here the Shaykh saying, yes, there are different opinions about, in general, what a woman is allowed to show outside the salah, in front of non-first degree relatives. Some would consider that she should cover up totally, nothing showing from her. And some going with this ayah, that she's allowed things that appear, and that it is the hands, the face, and what's included in it. The eyeliners, the jewelry in the hand, or the henna they have in their hands.
What is the meaning of jilbab, and is it like different for each culture and each place, or is it jilbab, it's one thing and jilbab is sahaba?
So the jilbab meant what it is, a loose, dark covering cloth for the woman that doesn't show her beauty to foreign men. So the common practice was made of black, but it could be any dark color that doesn't attract attention. So whether it's brown, dark gray, something like this, but not pink and yellow and red, all that stuff. And should be enough where it doesn't describe her beauty, does not describe her front, her back, or whatever description that men are attracted to. Should keep it to her immediate family, but not for foreigners to make her an object of desire. So that's what it should be. So some cultures, they have it a little bit lighter, but it shouldn't be very light, where the colors are beauty by themselves. The cloth itself should not be a mean of attraction. And some people wearing their hijab, they starting adding beauties to it, and so on, when it attracts attention. This is not the intention of the jilbab. The jilbab should be a cover by itself, not an attraction by itself.
What about like pants?
Women are not supposed to be wearing pants out in the public. The exception some people gave to the very loose pants that some farming ladies used to wear. In some farming communities, it's hard for women to work with long dresses, so they have what we call sherwal. In our culture, it's a very loose sirwal, very wide, that doesn't describe the hips and the legs and so on. So if she wants to farm, so usually they wear it under their dress. She might pull her dress up to her knees or above her knees, and she will be working in the farm, in the mud, and so on. So she will have some freedom of movement without showing her legs. But just regular pants that we see nowadays, tights, and all these yoga pants, they go around, this is not part of it. Yeah, she shouldn't be wearing yoga pants in front of her father and her brother. Husband is okay, but she shouldn't be wearing that. It should be still loose clothing. It doesn't have to be hijab, jilbab in front of her brother and father. At the same time, it shouldn't she go half naked. I mean, when these clothes are so tight, describing the whole body as if somebody is not wearing anything. This is against what is meant with the proper clothes for the man. There's a lot of harms when women don't adhere to the Islamic. It's not about controlling their bodies, not about controlling what they do and what they don't do. There's protection for women from being objects of desire. And women, all the time, wherever they go into work, they're going to study, they have to spend every day, they're trying to look the nicest, they impress everybody around them, and they're under stress, oh, I've gained some pounds, this one is more beauty than me, there's a new hairstyle, there's a new whatever makeup there is, I need to keep up with it, and so on. So when she wears the proper Islamic hijab, she doesn't have to follow these trends. And at the same time, it makes her the most beautiful woman in front of her husband. He doesn't see any other woman with makeup and the rest of her body showing. She's the only one that he sees. So she's the most beautiful thing for him. But if he goes out in the street and every woman that they see, there's nothing left for imagination, then he's gonna start comparing. She's going to feel insecure. Or we've seen people who are better than me, taller than me, thinner than me, or whatever the trend is, and she will feel insecure about it. But if that's the only one he's seeing, she's the most beautiful thing than ever, and he will cherish her more than anything else.
One small question. So what is defined as aura for women, right? Like if having a hijab is aura for women. So if it is not having a hijab is like exposing aura, that means she should be in a hijab all the time.
In front of non-first degree relative men. So we say a foreign man, there's a certain etiquette she needs to wear. There's certain etiquettes for the rest of her family, first degree family, women, and so on. So in front of men, as I said, the only thing can show hands and face. That's it. In front of her, rest of her family and friends and so on, as we mentioned, the places of jewelry. Half of the arm below is allowed to show. The neck is allowed to show. And half of the leg down is allowed to show. Above the knee, it's not allowed. Waist is not allowed. Anything that's showing parts of the breast is not allowed. Armpits is not allowed. Even in front of a brother or sisters, whatever it is. So you see sometimes the ladies going out in their own parties and so on, wearing short skirts, very tight, very revealing, low cuts, low backs, low like that. This is not the Islamic proper way of doing it.
Sheikh, is a little bit related to the topic, but in the story of Idris alayhi salam, it was mentioned that when he was about to die, he asked, he had a friend of angels, and he asked him to ask the angel of death to prolong his life, or ask Allah to prolong his life. And one of the sisters, she's interested in Islam, she was asking, why didn't Idris alayhi salam directly ask Allah Azza wa Jalla? Why did he have to go through the process of asking the angels?
Because he was there on the spot. He come and won't take his life. Now, the only humans that are given a choice at time of death are the prophets. They're given a choice whether they want to stay longer or they want to go. This is an honor that Allah has given a choice for the prophets. He knows what they're going to choose, but He honored them with a choice, not anybody else. We don't know of any prophet that asked that his life will be extended. I think Musa, alayhi salam, when he was dying, the angel of death came to him, and he told him that if you choose to live longer, you can put your hand on the back of an ox. Count how many hairs that's uncovering under your hand. This is how many years you'll be given to live longer. And say, what is after that? Say, death. Say, then now. He fulfilled his message. So there's nothing else for him to be done. Every messenger has a task. He fulfilled the task. He taught his people the Torah, and he showed him to them. Longer than this, we know that staying longer doesn't change the message. We don't know. He stayed for calling his people 950 years. It didn't change. Those who believed, believed. Those who didn't believe, did not believe. So it's a choice that Allah has given to them. And then, so the reason is he was there in front, and Allah tasked the angel of death, gave him permission. If he wants, grant him that. So it's already, so if somebody sends you with that wish, it's not up to the angel of death to decide that. Allah permitted him to accept it from the Prophet.
So the thing is, the angel of death didn't come to him because Allah Azza wa Jalla, when he told him to take Idris alayhi salam, I think it was the fourth heaven, right? So that's where they met because his friend, he had a friend of one of the angels. It wasn't the angel of death.
I'm not aware of that narration.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that specific narration, I'm not aware of it, whether it's authentic or not authentic. I know that Idris وَرَفَعْنَاهُ مَكَانًا عَلِيًّا is one of the upper heavens there, and Rasulullah ﷺ met him when he was going into Mi'raj. In every layer of the heaven, he's seen certain prophets, and he's seen Idris, one of the top layers there. But that specific narration had a friend angel other than the angel. I'm not aware of it.
Is it like is it okay to answer in a way like that Idris alayhi salam asked because that as a mean, not like, for example, we go to a doctor and we ask for medicine and stuff, but in reality we ask Allah Azza wa Jalla to heal us. But can we say that he used it as a means, like kind of like sabab?
Yeah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give means, use somebody as a intermediary means only for a specific person for a specific time. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam sometimes will ask Jibreel something, and Jibreel will ask Allah, or he can ask Allah directly. Allah can give direct inspiration to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or he will send it through Jibreel. So the means of communication, Allah decided between them. For us, our means is us and Allah. So we don't have means. We cannot ask Jibreel, oh Jibreel, ask Allah to forgive me. Because we don't have connection with Jibreel or any of the other angels or any of the prophets. When Rasulullah was alive, وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ إِذْ ظَلَمُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ جَاءُوكَ فَاسْتَغْفَرُوا اللَّهَ وَاسْتَغْفَرَ لَهُمُ الرَّسُولَ لَوَجَدُوا اللَّهَ تَوَّابًا رَحِيمًا. When he was alive, people, when they made something wrong, they go to the Prophet and say, oh, ask Allah to forgive us. When he's dead, their connection with Allah, they don't go to the grave. And so he's alive in his grave. I'm going to ask Rasulullah, he is alive, to intercede. No, Allah did not give us that connection. So each connection is different. The prophets has special connections. For us, our connection is between us and Allah. There's no more intermediaries. When the children of Yaqub, in Israel, after they found out the wrong they've done to their brother Yusuf, said, قالوا يا أبانا إنا ظلمنا أنفسنا فاستغفر لنا إنا كنا خاطئين. They realize they've done wrong. They say, oh, ask Allah to forgive us. He's alive in front of them. He's better than them. So they're asking him to make that intercession. But after his death, they don't go to his grave. The Sahaba, after the death of Rasulullah, they don't go to his grave and say, oh, we were your companions. Ask Allah to guide us, to forgive us, to do this or that. So the connection, when they're alive, you can do it. When there's death, your connection between you and Allah directly. وروى عبد الرزاق عن طريق أم الحسن قالت رأيت أم سلمة زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم تصلي في درع وخمار. الدرع هو قميص المرأة السابق الطويل لكن ليس هو الجلباب، والخمار ما يغطي رأسها وعنقها. Salama, the wife of Rasulullah, one of the ladies saw her when she's praying in her own house. She wore what they call dir'a, something that covers her whole body, but it's the house garment. It's not street garment. long one, and khibar, something that covers her head and her neck. So this is what the woman needs to wear during her salah. A cloth that covers her body, covers her neck, and head cover that covers the head, the ears, and the neck. You see some ladies wearing these head thingies that they think that this is hijab, and they wrap it back, the ears are showing, their neck is showing. This is not hijab. This is a fashion statement covering the head. This is not proper. It's better than going out without anything, but this is not a proper way. ويجب على المرأة أن تحرص على ثوب لا يكون رقيقا يبرز لون الجلد ولا يكون ضيقا يصف البدن. So when a woman praying, her clothes should be loose, not transparent, showing the color of her skin, not tight, describing her body. So she cannot even her own house wear tights, yoga pants, and a t-shirt and cover her head and pray. This is not proper clothes for prayer. And same thing for men applies also. When they're praying, they shouldn't be wearing tight clothes that describing the parts of the body they're supposed to cover between the waist and the knees. So these tight clothes, compression pants, things like this is not proper. هل يكشف الرجل رأسه في الصلاة؟ قال الله تعالى يا بني آدم خذوا زينتكم عند كل مسجد. وقال ابن كثير في تفسيره قال العوفي عن ابن عباس كان رجال يطوفون بالبيت عراة فأمرهم الله بالزينة والزينة اللباس وهو ما يواري السوء وما سوى ذلك من جيد البز والمتاع أي الهيئة الشارة والمتاع فأمرهم أن يأخذوا زينتهم عند كل مسجد. So how about men? We know what's the minimum need be covered. We read the ahadith that it is recommended not only covering the waist, that one should cover also the shoulders if he has means to cover the shoulders, he's not poor. How about the head? Covering the head during the salah. So the ayah in Surah Al-A'raf instructing the children of Adam, they should look their best every time they pray. خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ مَسْجِدٍ. So beside the minimum, they should try to look better than when they're going out, working or playing or whatever. They should have a little bit more, better when they're praying. So it became where, is it something wajib or something mustahab to cover the head? And you have here the ulama, the majority of them say it is something mustahab, that one will cover his hair, because it's part of the beauty. They were known that the Muslims at that time, they would not sit in front of somebody important without their head covered. So why would they sit in front of Allah or pray in front of Him without it? Ibn Abbas once, he's seen one of his servants praying without head cover. He said, if you meet somebody important, would you cover your head or not? He said, of course I would cover it. He said, Allah is more worthy of it. So it is highly recommended. Some ulama say it's makruh that one would not pray with a head cover. However, the salah is still valid. In certain schools of the Hanafi madhab, they say it is wajib, that if you don't pray with a head cover, then it is, the salah is not accepted. But this is the own ijtihad. Praying without a head cover is permissible, but if you can't cover it, it's better to do that. You get closer to the actions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba.
So when we do it, we will be doing it to try to mimic the actions of the Prophet, but not because it's a cultural sign of respect. Because like obviously nowadays it's the opposite. It's like if you're wearing a cap or like you're meeting somebody, you need to take it off like a sign of respect. So if we do it, we're doing it to mimic the actions of the Prophet.
Yes, yes. Yeah, so you're trying first to follow the order in the ayah. خُذُوا زِينَتَكُمْ عِنْدَ كُلِّ مَسْجِدٍ. So the zina, looking the best, the Muslims, the way they look the best, with the head cover. The minimum was like a scalp cover, and the more they have the amama. Amama is nowadays what they wear in most Arab countries, just a loose piece of cloth on their head. Sometimes they tie it, sometimes they don't. The amama doesn't have to be a turban that's turned 5-10 times around the head. This is later on actions that people have taken. It was used to be just piece of cloth. Sometimes they take another piece, a iqal, and they tie it around it. Sometimes they tie the same thing around their head. But anything that covers the head, يَعُمُّ الرَّأْسِ, so covers the majority of the head, called amama. It is covered the majority, then it is amama.
Sir, following up on this question, usually I see people when they put on a cap, they put it back.
Yeah, well, this is so they can pray. It can make sujood.
Yeah, but what he said is, if I wear a cap, I'm meeting you as a respected person, I'll take it off.
Yeah, Allah, it's better to wear Islamic head cover.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I wouldn't wear, I don't know, some Chicago Bull or whatever, LA, something Lakers or something logo, and I'm praying and I say this Islamic attire. It's not Islamic attire.
Sure. It is because in our country we have like, as you said, we tie them like 7 times, 8 times. Some people Sheikh who told me that the Prophet was commanded to prostrate on 7 places, and he told me that I should to like untake it so that my prayer to be valid. So what is that saying?
So the original hadith, yes, when one should pray on the forehead, the nose, 2 hands, knees, and feet. This is what's required. But the Sahaba, when they're praying, when it was hot or muddy, whatever, their amama, they pull it forward and pray on it. So it is permissible to do that, but it shouldn't be always. So if somebody especially have very thick amama, and they're going to be praying on something that's an inch deep in front of them, it's better to turn it over back so their forehead touch. But the salah is still valid. But to get the full sunnah of it, that they pray where their forehead touches. Allah, this will be better. The light ones, where they have a light amama, just like one layer and so on, they don't have to take it off. But when it becomes very thick, sometimes even their nose will not touch the ground. And that's something, some people make a mistake even without any amama. When they're praying, they have the forehead, but the nose is not touching. The nose is part of the organs that have to be touching the ground when one is praying. Is it time? A few more minutes? I think I'll stop here because we're going to be talking about, so this is the one condition about having the proper clothes. The other one about going towards Qibla. There's a lot of rulings talking about Qibla, so I'm not going to start it without finishing it.
Question very important. When it comes to cologne, is it okay for us to have colognes that have imitation of like alcohol or tobacco or things like this?
So having perfume is highly encouraged. Rasulullah has done it. To smell good is encouraged. The issue comes with the alcohol. So the alcohol, is it najis? There are different opinions of ulama about having as najasa or not. Wallahu alam, it is spiritual impurity rather than material impurity. The second thing, buying alcohol by itself is forbidden to buy it and sell it. If the alcohol in it is intoxicating, if somebody took that perfume and drank that perfume, got drunk, it's haram. Most perfumes don't do that. They have modified alcohol in it. Somebody drink it's poison, they will die. So, wallahu alam, it is permitted that one will wear perfume if it has alcohol in it, that the one that's modified. Pure, regular alcohol, it shouldn't. It's haram to buy.
I meant more so like for example, they have like a scent. Part of the scent is bourbon, for example.
Yeah, yeah, but and the scent should not be something forbidden. Scent of any kind of whiskey, bourbon, any of that, or smoking, or marijuana, or anything that's haram, forbidden, they shouldn't be wearing that.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.